7, Unit 1, Lesson 3, Part 2. Subtracting integers. These are the notes that are on paper, so you can follow along there and fill out your notes. In this lesson, we will be learning how to add and subtract, emphasis on subtract integers by hand, and explain and use the additive inverse property. We covered these properties in a previous video, so I'm not going to talk about that. You can look back to that video. The inverse property of addition. This you need to understand. For every number, there exists a number that will add to make 0. This number is called the additive inverse, or opposite. For example, the additive inverse of 3 is -3, or the opposite of 3 is -3. And the reason is 3 plus -3 makes 0. They add to make 0. Okay, the last property here, the substitution property. When two expressions have equal value, one may replace the other. For example, x plus 7 is my expression, and if x equals 3, I can rewrite it so that it's, instead of x plus 7, it's 3 plus 7, because x equals 3 in that case. Okay, the main idea with subtracting integers, in order to subtract integers, you add the opposite, the additive inverse. In fact, subtraction is just an extension of addition using negatives. The expression 3 plus -2 can be written as the subtraction expression 3 minus 2. A 7th grade math student should come to interpret the expression 3 minus 2 as combining a 3 and a -2 using addition. It is helpful to think of the negative sign as the opposite sign. The integer -3 is said -3. However, it could be referred to as the opposite of 3. And the opposite of -3, or the opposite of the opposite 3, is just 3. In fact, knowing it as the opposite helps, because if you see something like this, -x, it's actually better to think of it as the opposite of x, because, I mean, if x is 4, then this is -4, and it's actually negative. But if x isn't -4, let's say x isn't 4, let's say x is -2. Well, the opposite of -2 is actually +2. So opposite x in this case could be positive. So I wouldn't necessarily call it -x, but call it opposite x instead. Okay, examples from the notes. Change the subtraction expression into an addition expression, then evaluate. Okay, so the first one, 9 minus 3, becomes 9 plus -3. The positives win. The answer is 6. Next example, 13 minus 30 becomes 13 plus -30. The negatives win, and 30 minus 13 is 17, so it is -17. Example 115, 4 minus -3. Change it to add the opposite. 4 plus, the opposite of -3 is +3, and 4 plus 3 is 7. Example 116, 9 minus -1. That's going to be -9. Minus negative becomes plus the positive. Add the opposite. This is -9 plus 1. The negatives win. 9 minus 1 is 8. So it's -8. Next, -17 minus 53 becomes -17 plus -53. Because they are both negative, negatives win. And 17 and 53 make 70. So it is -70. Example 118. -4 minus -21. Well, it's -4 plus the opposite of -21 is +21. Notice in this that the first negative doesn't change. Did not change. Make sure not to accidentally change it. So -4 plus 21. And then the positives are bigger, so they win. So the answer here is +17. Okay, substitution. When you do substitution, we are going to evaluate the expression and use the values a is 3, b is -5, c is 14. We're going to make the replacements, the substitutions, and then evaluate. A is 3, b is -5. I need parentheses on this one. So this is 3 minus -5, which is the same as 3 plus 5. So the answer to this one is 8. Example 120, b minus c. Well, b is -5, c is 14, so this is -5 minus 14. That's the same as negative 5 plus negative 14. The negatives win because they're both negative. We add them together and we get 19. So the answer is negative 19. Example 21. C minus negative B. C minus the opposite of B is negative 5, so I'm going to need to put it in this way. Okay, this is 14 minus negative 5. That's 14 plus the opposite of the opposite of negative 5. So that's 14 plus a positive negative 5. That's kind of sounds weird, but this is just 14 plus negative 5 in the end, which is 9, because the positives win, and they win by 9. Okay, one more thing to talk about, and that is change. Subtraction is used to find the difference between two numbers. The difference between two numbers is their distance on a number line. Also, subtraction is used to calculate change. So the change formula, change equals the final amount of something minus the initial amount of something. By the way, the final is the end, and the initial is the start. So model each situation with a subtraction expression, then determine the amount of change. Your allowance changes from 15, that's the start, to 20, that's the end. So it's $20 minus 15 is 5. The change in your allowance is $5, and it is positive because it went up. The snowpack changes from 57 inches to 43 inches. Well, it ends at 43. It starts at 57. So end minus start. We have to do this as 43 plus negative 57. The negatives win. So the answer here is negative 14 inches. The change is negative, which means that it was a decrease. It changed by getting smaller by 14 inches. The elevator leaves a mine shaft. It goes from 1,580 feet below ground. 1,580 feet below ground is going to be negative 1580, and that is the start. And it's going to end at 15 feet. So the end minus the start. Oh, wait, I missed my negative. 15 minus negative 1580. I can go ahead and add the opposite, and I get 1595 feet. The elevator goes 1,595 feet. Joey works from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Well, that's the start, and 11's the end. So end minus start, that's 3. Joey works for 3 hours. So subtraction is used to calculate change, and calculating change gets done in a lot of different things.